The humidity in the Holloway ballroom wasn't just weather, it was weight. It settled on your skin. Heavy and suffocating. Thick with the scent of lilies and old money that had started to rot. 200 people were packed into the room, sweating in tuxedos and silk gowns, waiting for a tribute video to celebrate my grandmother Margaret's 80th Jubilee. The lights dimmed, casting the crowd into an expectant hush. I stood near the back, wearing a simple black dress that cost less than the appetizers being passed around. I wasn't here to celebrate. I was here because my mother, Patricia, had insisted. She said it was mandatory. She said family showed up for family, but when the projector flickered to life, it didn't show a montage of Grandma's life. It didn't show sepia-toned photos of her youth or clips from her wedding. It showed a spreadsheet. The font was size 72. Bold. Black against a stark white background. Invoice for Vivian Holloway, $485,320.44. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. My mother stepped into the single spotlight on the stage. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't raging. She was performing. She looked at the crowd with wet, tragic eyes, holding a microphone like it was a lifeline. "I didn't want to do this," she said, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "But transparency is the only way to heal. This isn't just a number. This is the cost of a bad investment." She clicked a remote. The slide changed. It was an itemized list. Private school tuition, $60,000. Ballet lessons, $15,000. Room and board, 18 years, $120,000. "I realized today that I have been pouring water into a sieve," she continued, looking directly at me. "I'm not asking for it all back. Darling, I know you don't have it. I just want an acknowledgement. Admit that you were a mistake I can no longer afford to subsidize." I felt the eyes of 200 strangers land on me. They weren't looking at me with pity. They were looking at me with disgust. The Whisper campaign my mother had been running for months had worked perfectly. They didn't see a daughter being humiliated. They saw a leech finally being called to account. I stood perfectly still. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just watched the numbers on the screen, feeling a cold, hard clarity settle in my chest. Before I show you exactly how I balanced that ledger, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I want to see how far the truth travels tonight. Most people would cry. Most daughters, standing in the center of a 200-person ballroom while their mother projected a 6-figure debt onto the wall, would crumple. They would beg. They would try to explain that braces and school lunches aren't loans. They are the bare minimum requirements of keeping a human being alive. But I didn't cry. Crying implies surprise. And I haven't been surprised by my mother since I was 12 years old. I looked at Patricia. She was dabbing the corner of her eye with a lace handkerchief, basking in the spotlight. She looked radiant, tragic, and expensive. She also looked confident. That was her first mistake. See, my mother suffers from a fatal lack of due diligence. To her, and to everyone in this room, I am Vivian the disappointment. I am the failed bank teller who lives in a studio apartment and takes the bus because she can't hold down a real job. That is the narrative Patricia wrote for me. She forgot to check the references. I am not a bank teller. I haven't been for 5 years. I am a senior data forensics specialist for the state. I don't count money, I hunt it. I track shell companies, unbury hidden assets, and map the digital footprints of people who think they are smarter than the algorithm. My mother thinks she is looking at a liability. She doesn't realize she is staring down the barrel of a federal audit. I shifted my gaze to the crowd. It was a sea of Savannah's elite old money. New facelifts, and enough diamonds to finance a small war. But the way they looked at me, it wasn't just judgment. It was revulsion. Mrs. Van der Hoven, the chair of the charity board, clutched her pearls and whispered to her husband. He glared at me and instinctively checked his wallet pocket. Suddenly, the last 6 months made sense. The cold shoulders at the grocery store. The invitations that got lost in the mail. My mother hadn't just invoiced me tonight. She had been running a Whisper campaign since Christmas. She told them I was a thief. She told them I had a gambling addiction. She told them I stole her jewelry to pay off debts to dangerous men. She had poisoned the well so thoroughly that even if I screamed the truth, they would only hear the desperate lies of a junkie. It was brilliant. Really. By painting me as a criminal, she inoculated herself against anything I might say. If I accused her of stealing, it would just be projection. I looked at my father, Robert. He was standing by the bar, staring intently at his scotch. He knew the truth. He knew I didn't steal. But he was a peacekeeper. And in the Holloway house, peace was purchased with my silence. He wouldn't save me. I checked the silver watch on my wrist. 8:12 in the evening. I wasn't checking the time, because I was bored. I was checking the upload status. The phone in my pocket was currently syncing 3 terabytes of cloned data to the cloud. Just in case they tried to physically take the device from me. 98% complete. I clasped my hands in front of me, adopting the posture of a scolded child. Let them think they have won. Let them think I am broken. Arrogance creates blind spots. And right now, my mother is staring into the sun. She thinks this is an intervention. She doesn't know it's a deposition. 3 years ago, my sister Ashley posted a photo of her brand new white BMW with the caption, "Hard work pays off." She didn't have a job. She didn't even have a learner's permit. What she had was our mother's credit card and a pathological need for validation. I was taking the bus to the state archives in the rain. My mother told the family I was finding myself. She told the neighbors I was struggling to launch. But I wasn't struggling. I was finding the paper trail. People always ask the same question when they hear stories like mine. They ask, if it was that bad, why did you stay? Why didn't you just leave? They think staying is a sign of weakness. They think it's some kind of trauma bond. Like I was waiting for them to finally love me. They are wrong. Staying wasn't weakness. It was the invisible chain of the survivor. See, a prisoner doesn't escape by running blindly at the wall. If you run before you're ready, you just get caught, punished, and locked down tighter. You escape by becoming part of the furniture. You memorize the guard's rotation. You learn exactly where the cameras have blind spots. You wait until you have a map, a key, and a weapon. I stayed because leaving meant leaving the evidence behind. And I wasn't going to walk away empty-handed while they burned my future to keep themselves warm. So, I became the invisible daughter. I became the useful idiot. When Patricia complained that the Wi-Fi was slow, I came over to fix it. And while I was in the system, I installed a keylogger on her laptop. When Ashley needed someone to organize her influencer closet because she was too overwhelmed to do it herself, I volunteered. And while I was folding designer scarves I could never afford, I was photographing the receipts she'd stuffed into the shoeboxes. When my father complained about the confusing tax updates, I offered to file for them. I scanned every offshore account number, every shell company transfer, and every forged signature. I didn't sleep. I audited. I sat at their dinner tables and let them mock my cheap clothes. I let them tell me I was ungrateful. I let them treat me like a servant in the house I legally owned but didn't know it yet. I swallowed every insult like a bitter pill. Because I knew that every day I stayed was another page in the dossier. It took 1,095 days to build the case. It took 3 years of smiling while I wanted to scream. But I didn't waste a single second. Now, the file is full. The map is drawn. And the guards are busy looking at the distraction I put on the wall. They think I'm trapped in here with them. They don't realize I'm the one holding the keys. Back in the ballroom, the silence stretched out. thin and brittle. My mother held the microphone with a practiced grace, her other hand resting theatrically over her heart. She was basking in the sympathy of the room. To them, she was the martyr, the elegant socialite, who had sacrificed everything for a daughter who turned out to be a thief. "I don't want to involve the authorities," Patricia said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the microphone amplified to every corner of the room. "I am a mother first. And despite everything Vivienne has stolen from me, despite the jewelry, the cash, the trust, I believe in redemption." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded document. A pen followed. "I'm willing to forgive the theft," she announced. "I won't press charges. I won't call the police. All I ask is that you take responsibility." She held the paper out toward me. It was a promissory note. A confession. "Sign this, acknowledging the debt and the theft," she said. "And we can put this ugly chapter behind us. We can work out a payment plan. We can heal." It was a trap. Elegant and lethal. If I signed, I was admitting to crimes I didn't commit. I would be legally liable for $500,000. More importantly, I would be the perfect scapegoat. When the IRS came looking for the missing charity funds, or when the bank questioned the forged mortgage, Patricia could point to this piece of paper. She could say, "Look, my addict daughter stole it all." She even confessed. I looked at my father. Robert was staring at his shoes, polishing the leather with his gaze, refusing to make eye contact. He knew. He had to know. But he was a coward who preferred a quiet life built on lies to a loud life built on truth. I looked at Grandma Margaret. She was slumped in her wheelchair near the stage, her head lolling to the side, a line of drool at the corner of her mouth. To the room, she looked senile. To me, she looked like a predator playing dead. I stepped forward. The crowd parted for me, recoiling as if failure was contagious. As I walked toward the stage, I analyzed my mother, not as her daughter, but as an auditor. There is a specific psychology to this level of cruelty. It's called the illusion of power of the empty wallet. See, people think my mother attacks me because she hates me. They are wrong. She attacks me because she is panic-stricken. Patricia isn't rich. She hasn't been solvent for a decade. Her power is a shell game, moving debt from one credit card to another, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and using social standing as collateral. The cruelty isn't a personality trait, it's a distraction strategy. She needs to be loud, aggressive, and dominant because if anyone stops looking at her performance and starts looking at her bank account, she ceases to exist. She isn't a matriarch. She is a cornered animal wearing a Valentino gown. I reached the steps of the stage. The lights were blinding. Patricia smiled at me, a shark baring its teeth. She held out the pen. She thought I was walking up there to surrender. She thought she had won. She didn't notice that I wasn't reaching for the pen. I was reaching for the HDMI cable on the podium. I took the microphone from my mother's hand. She let it go, assuming I was about to apologize to the room, to beg for their forgiveness, to sign her little confession. She stood back, crossing her arms, a smug smile playing on her lips. She was already planning her victory toast. "You want to talk about costs, Mother?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. It was amplified, clear, and cold, bouncing off the vaulted ceilings. "You want an accounting of debts? Let's balance the ledger." I didn't pick up the pen. Instead, I pulled the HDMI cable from the podium's laptop, the one projecting her lies, and plugged it into my phone. The screen behind me flickered. The room went pitch black for a second. A heavy, confused darkness. Then, the projector beamed a new image onto the wall. It wasn't a spreadsheet of school lunches. It was a bank transfer record. Subject: Holloway Family Trust. Beneficiary: Vivienne Holloway. Withdrawal amount, $150,000. Recipient: Patricia Holloway, Offshore Holdings. The silence in the room changed texture. It went from judgmental to confused. Slide 1. I said, pointing to the screen with the same detached professionalism of a coroner explaining a cause of death. My college fund, $150,000. Grandma Margaret set it up the day I was born. It was supposed to pay for my degree. Instead, on August 4th, 2016, 3 weeks before my freshman year, it was liquidated. I turned to look at Patricia. Her smug smile had vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed horror. She took a step toward me, but she seemed frozen, unable to process that the weapon she had built was now in my hands. I took out loans. I continued, addressing the crowd. I worked double shifts. I ate ramen. My mother told me the market had crashed. She told me the money was gone. But numbers don't vanish. They just move. I swiped my phone screen. The image changed. It was a split screen. On the left was the withdrawal slip. On the right was a receipt from a yacht broker. You didn't lose my future to the market, Mother. You lost it to a 40-foot catamaran you named the Patricia. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw Mrs. van der Hoven lower her champagne flute. The disgust in her eyes was shifting targets. But theft is simple, I said. Let's talk about fraud. I swiped again. The screen filled with credit card statements. Hundreds of them. The header on every single one read, Cardholder, Vivienne Holloway. For 3 years, my sister Ashley has been the envy of Savannah. I said, my eyes scanning the room until they landed on Ashley. She was standing near the buffet, clutching a limited edition Chanel clutch like a shield. She travels to Dubai. She stays in 5-star suites. She buys handbags that cost more than my car. You all follow her. You all like her posts about how hard work pays off. I clicked a button. The slide animated. Next to each credit card charge, a photo from Ashley's Instagram appeared. Time-stamped to match the transaction. Charge: $4,000. The Ritz-Carlton, Perry. Photo. Caption: Number, self-made. Charge: $12,000. Hermes. Photo. The very bag she was holding in her hands right now. Identity theft is a federal crime, I said, my voice dropping an octave. These cards were opened in my name. The statements were sent to a P.O. box I didn't know existed. The debt, $47,000 and climbing, is destroying my credit score. It's ruining my life so that she can have content. Ashley's face was the color of ash. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. She found neither. I looked directly at her. That bag you're holding? It wasn't a gift. It was a felony. The sound was sharp and sudden. Ashley's hand went limp. Her champagne flute slipped through her fingers and shattered against the marble floor. The crystal exploded, sending shards skittering across the silence. Nobody moved to help her. Nobody breathed. The air in the room was electric, charged with the terrifying realization that the Holloway family wasn't just messy. They were criminals. Patricia finally found her voice. It was a screech, high and desperate. Lies. These are forged. She's hacking the system. Turn it off. She lunged for the podium, her nails clawing at the air. I'm not done, I said. Lies. Patricia shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain of her own panic. She gripped the edge of the stage, her knuckles white, her nails digging into the wood. She forged them. She's hacking the system. Don't believe a word of it. My daughter is mentally unstable. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes wide and frantic, begging them to buy the lie one last time. begging them to see the frantic mother dealing with a problem child, rather than the criminal caught in the headlights. "It's AI," she yelled, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She generated these images. It's all fake." I watched her unravel. It was fascinating. In a clinical sort of way. Like watching a building collapse in slow motion. You don't look away, you just take notes on the structural failure. "I expected you to say that," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "Documents can be forged. Photoshop exists. You're right to be skeptical." "Mother," I tapped my phone screen one more time. "But audio?" I looked at the crowd. "That's a little harder to explain away." The speakers popped with static. Then, a voice filled the room. It wasn't the polished, honey-dripped voice Patricia used at galas. It was her real voice, sharp, cruel, and dripping with contempt. The recording was from 3 months ago. I had captured it while fixing the router in the hallway. My phone recording from my back pocket while she talked on her burner phone in the kitchen. The old bat is senile. The recording blasted. The clarity was terrifying. "She sits in that chair and drools. She won't notice the second mortgage until she's dead. And by then, I'll have liquidated the rest of the portfolio." A gasp rippled through the room. Louder than before. But the recording wasn't done. "What about the charity funds?" Another voice asked Ashley's voice. "Spend it." Patricia's recorded voice laughed. "The orphanage doesn't check their ledgers. I moved the gala donations to the Cayman account this morning. Buy the bag. Ashley, we deserve it." I hit pause. The silence that followed was heavy, violent, and absolute. I looked at Mrs. van der Hoven in the front row. She was the head of the charity board. She had written a $50,000 check at that gala. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She looked at Patricia not as a friend, but as a predator who had fed on her goodwill. "The orphanage of St. Jude," I said, addressing Mrs. van der Hoven directly. "They never received a dime of the $200,000 raised last year. It went to a shell company listed under my mother's maiden name. I have the wire transfers if you'd like to see them." The illusion of the Holloway status didn't just crack, it evaporated. In that moment, Patricia realized she hadn't just lost her daughter. She hadn't just lost the argument. She had lost her shield. The money. The status. The old money protection that kept her safe from consequences, it was all gone. She wasn't a socialite anymore. She was a pariah. She was a fraud who had stolen from the very people she was trying to impress. Her eyes darted around the room, seeing the doors closing on her future. She saw the disgust on the faces of her peers. She saw the ruin of her reputation. And then, she looked at me. The calculation left her eyes. The mask fell away completely, leaving only raw, animalistic fury. She didn't see a forensic specialist or a whistleblower. She saw the object of her hatred. The mirror, reflecting her own ugliness. She let out a sound that wasn't human, a guttural scream of rage. "You ungrateful little wretch," she howled. She didn't care about the crowd anymore. She lunged. She scrambled up the stairs of the stage, her heels clicking frantically, her hands reaching for my throat. She was going to physically silence me because she had run out of lies. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back, because out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement, the wheelchair in the shadows. The slumped figure of the matriarch, Grandma Margaret, was moving. Grandma Margaret didn't struggle to stand. She didn't wobble. She rose from her wheelchair with the fluid grace of a woman who had been faking frailty for months. The senile drool was gone. The confusion in her eyes was replaced by a steely, terrifying clarity. "Sit down, Patricia," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it stopped my mother in her tracks. It was the voice of the matriarch. The voice that had run this family and this estate for 50 years. "It's not your house. It's mine. And I didn't call a taxi for you. She walked to the edge of the stage, standing between me and my mother's rage. She looked at Patricia with a profound, weary disappointment. I called the feds. The kitchen doors swung open with a bang that made half the room jump. Uniformed officers flooded in, followed by 2 men in plainclothes suits, FBI. They moved with efficiency, surrounding the stage, surrounding Ashley, surrounding the exits. Patricia Holloway, one of the agents said, stepping onto the stage, "You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse." Another officer approached Ashley, who was still staring at the shattered glass on the floor. "Ashley Holloway, you are being detained for identity theft and credit card fraud." The chaos that followed was absolute. Guests were shouting, recording on their phones, backing away as if the Holloway name was radioactive. Robert, my father, finally moved. He stumbled toward Patricia as they cuffed her, weeping openly. "I didn't know," he sobbed. "I swear I didn't know." Patricia looked at him with pure disdain. "You never knew anything, Robert. That was your only talent." As they led her away, she didn't look at me. She kept her head high, clinging to the last shreds of her delusion. Marching out like a queen, going to the guillotine, Grandma Margaret turned to me. She placed a hand on my cheek. "You did well, child. The audit is closed." I walked out of the ballroom. I walked past the stunned guests, past the weeping father who had let me be the scapegoat to save his own comfort. I walked out the front doors into the heavy Savannah night. In the weeks that followed, the Holloway estate was seized and sold to pay back the charity. Grandma Margaret moved into a modest condo downtown. She said she preferred the view. We used the remaining recovered assets, the money Patricia hadn't managed to squander, to launch a new initiative. We called it the Ledger Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing forensic accounting services to victims of financial abuse. We help spouses trapped by hidden debt, children whose credit was ruined by parents, and elderly people targeted by their own families. We help them find the truth. We help them balance the books. I sat in my new office, looking at the framed photo on my desk. It wasn't a family portrait. It was a picture of me and Grandma Margaret on the day the foundation opened, cutting the ribbon together. Numbers don't lie. They don't play favorites. But if you ignore them long enough, they will send you to prison. If you've ever had to audit your own family to find the truth, share your story in the comments. And if you believe that justice is a dish best served with receipts, hit that subscribe button.